good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Financial Paths on the Circle G. In our previous episodes, we've been talking about a lot of items that Elvis has been purchasing, like trucks, like trailers, trailer homes. Hi, Gun. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. But what we haven't really talked about much is how Elvis paid for these things. Now, in our last episode, we saw Red refer to the fact that Elvis bought everything with cash. But when we really got into that, we understood from what Red said that Elvis promised to pay individuals. Those individuals worked up invoices. Those invoices made it to Vernon at the Graceland offices, and then those invoices were paid. And so the trucks were not financed, but they weren't bought with cash from a wad in Elvis's pocket either. They were bought with a check, which is a cash equivalent, but paid after Elvis had taken possession of the vehicles. Hi, Anna. Hi, Terry. Thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. So we know that, at least for some of the purchases, there was a lot more paperwork on the back end. And we saw that Marty Lacker, Elvis's friend from high school and who he brought into the Memphis Mafia in 1960, he was an administrator. He did a lot of paperwork for Elvis. He had to work on all the registrations and make sure that the registration for the right vehicle, the one with the right VIN number, vehicle identification number, and all that other identifying information made it to the right owner of the vehicle, which might be one of the Memphis Mafia members, might be one of the contractors or people that were on the ranch that Elvis didn't even know, who were there doing some kind of work on the ranch at the moment that Elvis was giving away his trucks. And with the trailer homes, there was, of course, a lot more paperwork. And here's what Albert Goldman had to say about it. Now, Albert is the guy who wrote the book Elvis, which was published in the early 1980s, and is the first true academic look at the life of Elvis. But Albert had a disdain for Elvis. He didn't like Elvis. He didn't like Elvis's lifestyle. He didn't like Elvis's history. He didn't like Elvis's roots. You name it. Whatever it was about Elvis, Albert did not like it. And so Albert didn't treat him very well in his book. So you always have to remember how Albert felt about things when we look at anything that Albert says. But what Albert says is, for the first and only time in his life, Elvis had to make some of his purchases on credit. Now, why would Albert say such a thing? Because it's obviously not true. I mean, we're talking about the Circle G Ranch, which we know Elvis put $5,000 down with a check, and he promised to pay for the rest, and the rest was financed as a mortgage. Pretty sure that's a kind of a credit. Absolutely a type of financing. Elvis bought Graceland the same way. He put some money down and he financed the rest using his credit. And it was financed. Elvis began his experience with finances of his own with credit, because he went to the stores on Beale Street, stores like Lansky Brothers. And Bernard Lansky met this nice young man who told him that, I don't have any money to purchase the items that I want from you, Mr. Lansky. And Mr. Lansky says, that's okay, son. You can give me a little bit of money now, and I'll put this shirt away for you. And when you come back, you pay a little bit more money. And when you get it paid off, the shirt's all yours. But you don't have to worry about me selling it in the meantime. So that was a layaway plan, is the way we would know that today. But it's a type of a credit. And even before he went to Lansky Brothers, Elvis walked into a department store on Main Street, I believe, either Beale Street or Main Street, right there in the heart of Memphis. I believe it was called the Federal Clothing Store. And it existed to sell clothes on credit. And Elvis and his cousin, Gene Smith, his best friend at the time, they had jobs. Some of their first jobs, and they had money in their pockets. And they wanted nicer clothes. And they went into the Federal Clothing Store to look at the clothes and figure out how this credit thing worked. And there was a girl running the window. And she took their credit applications, and Elvis flirted with her, and she did not like it very much. And she let Elvis know that she wasn't very appreciative of his advances. But Gene, well, she liked Gene a lot. She liked Gene so much, she ended up marrying him. Her name was Louise. So Elvis absolutely had bought things before on credit. I've lost track of the chat, and I'm not even sure who I've said hi to and who I haven't, so let me just do a roll call. Hi, Anna. Hi, Terry. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Lorna. Hi, Emma. Thank you guys all so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And I know Emma just did her first live stream today. I missed it by like 2 minutes, so I'm hoping to go back and watch it later. But I believe it was very successful because it looked like it lasted over an hour. So everybody that is here should definitely check out Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. And also check out Elvis History. That's Terry's channel. He's putting out some new videos. And he put one out about clam bake, which dovetails right into the time period that we're talking about here on the Circle G Ranch. But why does Albert Goldman, whose biographied all of Elvis's life, so he has to know that this is not a true statement when he writes it, but it sounds good. So he puts it here. Well, he's pulled it from somebody else. And that somebody is Becky Yancey, who is the secretary who works with Vernon in the office at Graceland. And in that office, they answer up to 25,000 pieces of fan mail a week. A week. Except during the holidays, when it grows to be even more substantial. And in that office, there's a picture window that looks out onto the meditation garden so that everyone in there can see the piece of that garden as they move through their daily task of doing things for Elvis. Mostly answering his fans, but also a lot of bookkeeping, check writing, filing, administrative paper tasks. And Becky says Elvis financed the trailers through the Westinghouse Credit Corporation. It was the first time and the only time I knew Elvis to buy anything on time. Becky's statement is that for the period that she worked there, this is the only thing she knew of. Now, of course, there's things that Becky didn't know of. But these are the only things that she knew of, these trailers that Elvis financed. That's what buying on time is. It's financing. Well, as I've just discussed, Becky apparently doesn't remember the Circle G Ranch, which is what this is all about. And that she was definitely there for the purchase of that. And that was definitely a mortgage. Now, she wasn't there for the purchase of Graceland itself, but again, that was a mortgage, and at some point there were payments made on it, and somebody had to pay it off at some point, so I don't know if she was there during that period either. But this is not the only thing Elvis has ever bought on credit, and it's not the only thing Elvis is ever going to buy on credit, as Albert Goldman is implying, as we move into the 70s, when there's even larger purchases. There's definitely credit. But Albert is trying to use this, and I think the reason that Becky puts it into her narrative in the first place is that she believes Elvis is having financial issues, and he can't afford the trailers, and therefore he has to finance them. That somehow he doesn't have the cash flow to purchase these trailers. And Albert Goldman wants to use that financial issue, that there's possibly a downfall in Elvis's finances. He wants to use that against him. So he's showing that right here, Elvis is buying these things on credit, and it means he has no money. He's on drugs. He's spent all his money. He's refusing to go to work. Elvis is in trouble. That's kind of the Albert Goldman narrative. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but it's a narrative I think that exists in a lot of Elvis literature out there about this period in time. I also don't think it's true. And because this financing is not a weakness, he's not running out of money and he needs to finance these trailers. This is a way to make his dream real in a language that the world understands, the language of finance. In the trailers, he has done specifically this way so that he can then refinance them to the guys, and the guys can own them. And we've talked about this in past episodes. And ultimately, this is why Billy and Joe Smith own the trailer that was on the Circle G and that they move into when they leave Graceland after Elvis passes away. So this was not a weakness on Elvis's part. This was a plan. He had plans. Plus, he got to give the commission of the financing. You know, he didn't personally give it, but when these sales guys get financing on a large purchase like this, they get a cut of it. And so Elvis bought these trailers at the maximum advantage to the salespeople. So they also got a benefit out of this. But the main reason, at least I believe, and I can't prove it, so if any of you believe differently or have different ideas or see different things in the source material, feel free to put it in the chats or put it in the comments. While you're there, hit like, make sure you're subscribed, get the notification button on, and that you are telling everyone that you know that loves Elvis all about Hillbilly Cat history, so that they can join us here and get their opinions into the chat, into the comments. And there's a question about who is Becky, and yes, it's Becky Yancey, who worked in the office with Vernon. And Gunn is asking, so Elvis had no financial issues at the time mentioned? Well, that's what we're delving into, Gunn, so let's take a look. We're going to get more into that. But just before we do, we're going to listen to this song about what he gave to people while they were here on the Circle G Ranch. And then we're going to come back and we're going to figure out, how did he finance this? And the name of this song is He Gave Us Everything.
Oh, 17, snow on the ground, Circle G, love all around. He bought that ranch, opened the gate, said come on in, let's celebrate. Tractor pulling through the snow, laughter rising, spirits glow. Boat behind, wives and men, family fun again and again. He wasn't just a star in lights, he was the warmth in winter nights. Kindness wrapped in velvet flame, a heart that never played the fame. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight ring, he gave us love, he gave us wings. Circle G, where the angels sing. He gave us everything. Riding horses, lake so still, bridge and cross on the quiet hill. Barbecue smoke, stories told, moments more precious than gold. He'd ask me who I'm dating now, what I dream, what I'll allow. He cared like kin, not just a name. He lived for love, not for acclaim. He wasn't just a voice on stage, he was the soul behind the page. A man who'd sing to heal your day and laugh the midnight blues away. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight rain, he gave us love, he gave us grace. Gave us everything. Oh, he lived like a shadow in the night, famous face, but heart so bright. Couldn't walk the street like you and me, so we built a world where we were free. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight ring, he gave us love, he gave us wings. Circle G, where the angels sing. He gave us everything. He gave us everything.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we walk the financial paths Elvis blazed on the Circle G Ranch. Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And thank you, Gunn, for the kind words about the song. I appreciate them. You too, Terry. And Lorna, thank you so much for your kind words. And now we're going to talk about what Sonny West had to say about how Elvis financed all the spending he did on the Circle G. And here's exactly what Sonny said. That money was just piling up there in that damn bank account into millions. Elvis could not spend it fast enough. So we've heard from Marty, who seems to be concerned about Elvis's spending. We've seen that Alan Fortis and Red West also seemed concerned about the amount Elvis was spending. Becky Yancey seems to have a concern. Vernon has come to Marty Lacker at one point and shown him a tally from an adding machine that says Elvis spent $98,000 on automobiles, trucks during that month, that first month on the ranch. So Elvis has spent a lot of money. So Vernon's got some concern. But what Sonny says is drop in the bucket, because there's millions and millions where that came from. It's all in the bank accounts. It's just piling up. And Elvis just, all he's got to do is spend it, and he can't get it out of that bank account fast enough. So Sonny has no concerns based on the amount Elvis is spending. It's not bothering Sonny at all. He sees no reason that anyone should be worried about Elvis's finances. And Becky Yancey, again, working in the office, she says Elvis didn't finance the 25 or 30 new Ford Rancheros he gave away. Now, we've heard 33, but Becky gives us a number, a range from 25 to 30 new Ford Rancheros, well, that he gave away. Maybe she doesn't count the ones he gave to the guys as gave away, or the one that he kept for himself. So it's a pretty close number. But the more important thing she says is that he didn't finance those. We heard Red say he paid cash. And when we really got to thinking about it, and now that we've seen Becky say this, you know, Vernon's paying for it with a check on the back end, cash equivalent. No financing here. So if he is experiencing an issue where he needs to finance the trailers, it's not extended to the point that he needs to finance $100,000 worth of new vehicles. So then Becky says, I eavesdropped one afternoon as Mr. Presley, who's Vernon, was talking to Colonel Parker by telephone about Elvis's wild spending. Neither of them could get him to slow down. Mr. Presley asked me to compile some totals of monthly expenditures, and when he tried to show them to Elvis, Elvis said he didn't want to see them. Let's pull this apart a little bit. Becky says, I eavesdropped. That seems bad. But at least she's able to tell us what she eavesdropped about. But I'm assuming that means it's a very open floor plan within the office, and she could hear Vernon on the phone, and she knew he was talking to the colonel, and she could possibly hear the colonel through the receiver. That's what I assume she's saying here. And not that she listened so much on purpose as she's in the room and she can hear. And of course, it's an interesting conversation, so you listen, which I guess is on purpose. But it's not like she's standing at a wall with glass up to it, you know, trying to hear what she's not supposed to. And she hears Colonel Parker and Vernon on the phone talking about Elvis's wild spending. Now, wild spending is obviously a term that the Colonel and Vernon are using. I doubt Elvis is describing his own spending as wild. He's buying what he wants to buy when he wants to buy it. And that neither of them could get him to slow down. Elvis is not a man who can be told what to do. Elvis is chafing at this moment in time because he's had to sign this new contract with the Colonel. Because he's about to have to do clam bake, which he's contractually obligated to. So he's a man of his word. He signed these contracts. He's going to live up to them. Just like these contractual changes with the Colonel. He signed them. He's going to live up to them. But he doesn't have to like them. And he doesn't like things at this moment. And he's imposing his will on other portions of his life. Like everything that's going on at this ranch. This is an extension of Elvis's will. The entire ranch and everything that is happening on it. And so they're telling him, hey, slow down on your dream. And he's saying, nope, full speed ahead. And in fact, we're going to go ahead and double the speed. And Colleen says, I understand Vernon's concerns, but Elvis works so hard for his money. Let him do what he wants with it. And Gunn is agreeing with Colleen that Elvis should be allowed to do what he wants with his money. And then Vernon asks Becky to compile some totals of monthly expenditures. He's asked her to put together a report that makes it very clear on one page, something simple to look at, that says you've spent a lot of money. This is a very large number. Even you will see that this is a large number if it's all together on this one page in one big number. And they probably even made the number bigger. You know, if they, although it's typewriters, I guess you didn't really have your choice of fonts back then. But Vernon's trying to get this into a visual format that he can show in one page to Elvis about how much he spent. So obviously Vernon himself is alarmed. And then when he brings this to Elvis, Elvis says, I don't care. I don't want to see it. It doesn't bother me. It's just money. I've got it in the bank account. I'm going to spend it. And here's what it said on this ledger that Vernon had made up, that Becky put together for January 1967 expenditures. So this isn't even Circle G Ranch. This is expenditures that have gone out while they're still at Graceland, before he's even bought Circle G Ranch, which happens officially on February 8th. Probably on February 3rd, but the check, the deposit check, is given on February 8th, and that's when the mortgage begins. And here's what it says. 100 bales of hay at $1.35 per bale is $135, which today would be about $1,300. 20 bags of horse feed was $38, or $1.90 a bag. 10 blocks of salt was $3, or 30 cents per block. It's about $30 altogether in today's money. And there was also, all of this was purchased from a man named Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill Spence of Graceland Farms. We're going to talk about him in a moment. But during this month, there was also one horse trailer purchased from a man named Morris White for $1,000, which today would be about $10,000. So altogether, there's roughly $1,200 of expenditures here, which today would be about $12,000. Now, Elvis is a multimillionaire. And Vernon is very concerned that he has spent in real money back in those days. Elvis was a multimillionaire, and Vernon is concerned about $1,200 that has been spent. Okay, so I think that helps you get some scale of what's actually going on with who's worried about what. $1,200, this is not worrying Elvis in any way. He barely even notices $1,200. He spends more than that on some jewelry pieces. So $1,200, it's really not a big deal. Now, later when he gets Circle G, now we're getting into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? But here where Verna begins to get concerned, it's way back at $1,200. So I think you can understand now why Vernon becomes so concerned about the dollars that are being spent. To Vernon, they are enormous. But let's think about $100,000 spent on the trucks. In real money back in those days, $98,000. Let's just round it off to 100. And we know that he spent something like $140,000 to get all the trailers hooked up. And I don't know if that was the cost of the trailers too. I think it was. But somebody has estimated that he spent $500,000 in the first couple of months that he was there. We saw that in one of the previous episodes. I don't remember who said it, but $500,000. Let's say that it really was $500,000. $250,000 a month, $250,000 per month that Elvis has spent. It is a shockingly high number. It's big. It's massive. It's legendary. If Vernon's concerned at $1,200, obviously Vernon's concerned. If the Colonel becomes concerned somewhere around $10,000, and we don't have a number for when the Colonel becomes concerned, but let's say it's 10 times when Vernon becomes concerned. Yeah, the Colonel's still concerned at this point. But Elvis has $1 million at all times kept in his checking account. That's part of the legend we all know. It's said over and over and over, and it's said from a very early point in his career. So in 1967, we know he has a standing directive, keep $1 million in the checking account at all times. And so over the course of 2 months, he spent half the checking account. Well, it wasn't really half the checking account because somebody, Vernon, had to put more money into that checking account to bring it back to $1 million. But even if they didn't replenish the account, Elvis still has half of what he already had in the account. So is Elvis in financial trouble? I mean, that if you spent half your checking account, would you be in financial trouble? I mean, you might be financially worried. You might become a little more planning about what you're going to do in the future. You might have to institute an emergency budget, but are you having financial issues? No, not really. I mean, he's still got $500,000 in a checking account. That's not to note any of his other assets. So if you had $500,000, do you feel like you'd be having financial issues? So I don't know. But Vernon's worried from $1,200. So I think that helps us put some things in perspective, and maybe just makes things more confusing. But I find those numbers to be very interesting. And Anna says that Elvis was the one sweating under the lights, hurting his eyes night after night. So this is slightly before that, but he is hurting himself on the movie sets month after month, and he's destroying his ability to sleep with his constant travel 3 times a year back and forth from Memphis to California, plus the pharmaceutical habits that he's doing in order to maintain his wakefulness when it's needed from the cameras. That's really why he has to maintain that schedule, is the moment the cameras are ready to shoot, you've got to be ready. You have to be able to shoot at that moment. Otherwise, all the preparations and money are wasted. And it also says, I think Circle G could have potentially saved his life or prolonged it either way. And I think that if it had worked the way that his dream said it would work, I would agree with that. But we're the first month in. Everybody, all of his internal people are no longer supporting him. Once they were no longer getting houses, they weren't really into these trailers. Vernon's all over him about the $1,200 before this adventure even started. I mean, so he's done this for relaxation, but he's actually brought on a whole new host of obstacles that are put in his way that he has to overcome, which is both good and bad for him. He's good at overcoming obstacles. It's good for him when he's overcoming obstacles, but at the same time, he needs this rest, and he is unable to get it because no one will stop fighting him, even his own people, even Vernon and the Colonel. I mean, when they're trying to get him to stop spending, well, I'm sure he's not taking that well. You know, that's just another stressor. No one's telling the Colonel to stop spending. No one's getting involved in his life. No one's telling Vernon to stop spending anything. But now let's get back to Mr. Bill. So he bought a bunch of these supplies for the horses at Graceland from Mr. Bill Spence of Graceland Farms. And Mr. Bill has already been attached to our story. We just didn't know it. We didn't know his name. In fact, he's been previously unseen in the story. He's been unnamed, but he was a very important player right at the very beginning. Because Mr. Bill is the man who sold Elvis the horse Colonel Midnight. And that's the horse that Elvis chose for Vernon. That's the horse they were looking at and purchasing when Elvis drove back. Alan Fortas was driving Elvis's white double cab Dodge pickup truck, which later has a picture of the rising sun painted on the side, Elvis's horse. And as they're driving back, they drive past the Circle G Ranch and they see the cross. And that's what starts the whole Circle G adventure. And that's when they're buying from Mr. Bill, Colonel Midnight. On the way back, in the illumination of the dawn, there was the cross. And Mr. Bill, he was a fair horse trader, and he never attempted to take advantage of Elvis on any of the individual purchases that Elvis made from him, happy instead just to conduct business with Elvis. Now, a lot of other people, when they saw Elvis coming, and we've heard this in previous episodes from his veterinarian, the man who worked on his horses at both Circle G and at Graceland, that veterinarian said that a $300 horse, once Elvis stepped on the lot, became a $3,000 horse. So people would try to take advantage of him to the tune of 10 times the market price of any goods and services, not just horses. It would even been on the blocks of salt that Mr. Bill is selling Elvis, but Mr. Bill's not taking that advantage, and that's why Elvis is doing business with him. And Elvis purchased many horses from Mr. Bill at current fair market rates, ranging from $250 to $750 per horse. Now, he did pay more for Colonel Midnight, but that horse, he was a favorite of Mr. Bill's wife. And she did not want to let him go. She wanted to keep Colonel Midnight. But Elvis just kept increasing his offer until she was forced to concede. She couldn't stand against Elvis when he got the price up high enough. No matter how much she loved Colonel Midnight, she had to part with him because they were running a business of selling horses. And at the time that Elvis bought the horse, its name was Midnight. And Elvis added Colonel as a reference to Colonel Parker. Kind of a little inside joke for he and the guys and Vernon to share. Because now Vernon was on top of the Colonel. Now, there are purchase receipts that exist that, unfortunately, I don't have copies of, so we can't see them. But they exist, and they're referenced. And they're for more than $1,000 of saddles and equipment for horses from a relative of Mr. Bill. Because Mr. Bill had a son named Spence, and Spence owned a local shop named Spence's Horse Service and Ranch Store on Mill Branch Road in Memphis. And this is another one of those places, family owned, down to earth people that Elvis shopped at. As we've seen in past episodes, some other saddleries and leather shops that he shopped at. And we don't know which store Elvis took Larry Geller and his family to get them outfitted. It might have even been Spence's here. Spence's Horse Service and Ranch Store. Now, George Klein, Elvis's friend from high school, he was president of Elvis's Humes High School senior class. And he worked for Elvis in 1957. And he went on to become a famous DJ on his own. And he was lifelong friends with Elvis, one of his very best friends. And George, every time there was a loyalty test, George passed with flying colors. He was a true friend. George has his own insight on the finances. And he says the Colonel had recently renegotiated and extended Elvis's contract with RCA to guarantee Elvis $300,000 a year as an advance against royalties. But even with that sum, plus the movie money he made, Elvis was now spending money faster than he was earning it. So George, he references some change in contract with RCA. Now, we haven't looked at that. We looked at the change in contract between the Colonel and Elvis. But now RCA, part of what the Colonel's done, and I don't know what percentage he gets of this, I would assume the 25% because this is part of Elvis's main earning potential is the royalties. But I don't know. We'd really need to go back and examine both of these contracts out together. But Elvis is now receiving $300,000 at the beginning of the year as an advance against what he will make in royalties throughout the year on sold RCA product. So he doesn't have to wait for the product to sell. They're fronting that money to him. And then at the end of the year, if it didn't all work out, I think he gets to keep the $300,000. But if they owe him more, they pay him more. And what we know from this venture on the ranch, people have said he spent $500,000, but I think we've added up, it's closer to $300,000. And the price of the ranch is more than that, but again, it's financed. So he didn't necessarily pay it all off at once. It kind of feels like he paid whatever he got right here, this $300,000. That was the financing for the ranch. It's pretty much what he spent, is this $300,000. Now, George says he's spending money faster than he earns it. Well, obviously, we know that's not true. Because he got the $300,000 in a one lump sum. So I don't think he spent it faster than that. So, when we really get to looking at it, even if he spent some more, I don't think it's more than he was earning in from the movie contracts. So I think George has a perspective on it. I don't think he has the full perspective. That again, to George, $300,000 sounds like a lot of money, but he knows Elvis is spending massively. And he's just not able to compute these numbers in his head. I don't think any of us could if we were there in the moment. And so to him, it looks like Elvis is outspending the money that he's earning. Now to Sonny West says, no way. He's got millions left in the bank. And there's a discussion in the chat saying that that Elvis had this dream and they should have let him live it, and it's such a shame that they didn't let him keep it, and that he spent more on others than himself, and that he was a kind and generous man. And there's a wish that more of his inner circle had appreciated it. I think they did become somewhat callous to it. And it went from being a wonder to being daily routine. But that's also the reason that a lot of them were brought in the first place, is same thing happened to Elvis. It kept changing from wonder to daily routine, and he was trying with each new person to recapture the wonder so he could remember, this is a dream that I'm living, and I can't get bogged down in the mundaneness of everyday life, even when it's so wonderful like this, that I have to be able to step back and realize how great it is. And the ranch, I believe, is allowing him to have that focus. And Becky Yancey says, expenses for maintaining Graceland and Elvis's homes in California were, of course, adding to the drain on his finances. I wrote checks for bills totaling $100,000 a month while Elvis had the ranch. So Becky tells us a huge number here, $100,000 a month. But again, that's a tenth of what he's got in the checking account at any one time. So that's not putting him into financial peril as long as the checking account is being refilled. And we've never heard any indication that it didn't have $1 million in it at any one point in time. Of course, that's the legend. So, I mean, we don't know, but that's what we're led to believe. He's always got $1 million in the checking account. And what Becky fails to tell us is, when he doesn't have Circle G, how much is she writing then a month for expenses? Like, then we would know how much the Circle G is adding to the expenses. As she's just said, Elvis's Graceland and homes in California were adding to the drain on his finances. Well, I don't know that they were adding. They were the drain on his finances. And then he added the Circle G. But how much was the addition of the Circle G? We don't know. We just know it's $100,000 altogether. But even without the Circle G, he's still going to have a financial expense every month. It's probably in the tens of thousands. Becky Yancey also says, the boys were putting so much on Elvis's account at Sears that we had to type a list of people authorized to charge items in his name. It was a long list. There's dichotomy in this statement that I love. One is that the boys have access to Elvis's Sears credit account. So they go to Sears at this new mall. This mall is only like a year old. So if you were with me for many episodes ago, we talked about Elvis went to this mall. he went to the Sears. He bought a tractor that had a wagon, and he pulled a bunch of the women, the wives of the guys, including Priscilla, and a big guy in the Memphis Mafia named Chief, well, that he called Chief. And they were all in the wagon, and Billy Smith was riding on the front of the tractor, and they drove all through the little neighborhood that's Dolan Street and all those roads behind Elvis. And they sang Christmas carols to people, and eventually Elvis dumped over the wagon, and Chief fell on top of all the women. So if you want to hear that story told much better, check out my earlier episodes. But the point here is that there's this new Sears there, and Elvis's guys are going in there and charging all kinds of stuff. And I don't think they even had to have a card at that time. I think they just went in and said it was on Elvis's name. So now Vernon Presley is providing to Sears a list of who can and cannot charge. But the list is really long. So Vernon is trying to exert control, but the list is so long, it probably has no effect. I think there's another implication here that people are charging stuff to Elvis that's really for their own use. It's really theirs, that they probably should be paying for on their own. I don't know that, but it seems to be implied. And Becky Yancey says, as the financial situation became more threatening, Mr. Presley ordered me to type letters to all employees, notifying them that there would be no more loans from Elvis. The loans resumed a year or two later. So I think in some ways, if you worked for Elvis, it really didn't matter how much you made, because in times of need, you could ask him for a loan. And the way Marty described it was they were listed as loans for tax purposes, but they were never going to be repaid back. There was an understanding these were truly gifts, but they were registered as loans for paperwork, tax reasons. But right now, they put a hold on those items. And Becky says it's as the financial situation became more threatening. Well, I think it has less to do with the financial situation, like she may believe that's why it is. But it has more to do with an event that's going to occur after Elvis leaves for Clambake. And Becky doesn't give us a specific time frame of when this happened. But once we hear what happened at Clambake, I think you guys will all agree that whatever perks that the guys had were severely curtailed about the middle of March 1967. And we'll see that coming up. It's going to be in a future episode. And Becky Yancey says that fans began showing up. The more timid stood with their faces pressed against the sturdy chain link surrounding the property. The more adventuresome clambered over. Fans could sit in their cars or walk to the fence and watch Elvis as he moved between the house and the long horse stables. So I believe Becky is referring to early February, maybe into March of 1967, that these fans are able to show up and see Elvis through the chain link fence that's already on the property, was already there when he bought it. And then Elvis is going to erect a wooden fence to get more privacy. But of course, that's going to cost more money. It's part of these finances. And we're going to see that in our next episode when we return tomorrow. to look at fencing on the Circle G. But for now, we're going to part once again, and I'm going to leave you with my regular words to keep on taking care of business. And I'm going to leave you with this song, The Circle G Dreams.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust. But the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like prayer storms. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my home. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.